This year's Open Studios in Jamaica Plain will branch out with new territory and events around Hyde Square in what's being developed as a lively center of Latino culture. The Hyde Square Task Force plans a festival this Saturday and more events in October. To tell us about the Latin Quarter Arts Festival are the manager of donor relations and special projects for the Hyde Square Task Force, Emma Blaxter, and the festival's guest curator of programming, Zo.E. Ling. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start with Emma, because Hyde Square people go, well, I see signs in Spanish, I see signs in English. Isn't that all you need? But you're talking about something a lot more than that with this Latin Quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. We are talking about making the Hyde Jackson neighborhood the heart of where you would go in Boston for Latino arts and culture. So the Hyde Square Task Force helped facilitate the sale of a beautiful church in that neighborhood. And in addition, we're planning essentially 2 years of different kinds of arts and culture events that will bring people together in that area, that will just provide a space for the neighbors and residents to go, and also be in the way that the North End is Little Italy, that the Hyde Jackson Square neighborhood becomes the Boston's Latin Quarter, really truly. And it was named that by Mayor Menino actually in 2013, but we're really interested in exploring that and expanding it so that people from all over Massachusetts and Boston in general come to our neighborhood for food and art and culture.
So talk about what you've been doing to get ready for this, because this isn't just about putting something out there and people just passively look at it.
No, it's not. So the artists involved are Boston artists, and it's Annabelle Vasquez, it's Genesis Baez, Raul Gonzalez, Elaine Bay, Pat Falco, and also their interactions with the youth. So Genesis, for instance, is working on a storytelling workshop with the youth, and they're going out in the community to take portraits and different documentary photos as well, with an ethnography sort of focus. And those photos, for instance, are going to be displayed in the church, along with the theme of sort of reintroducing the space as a cultural center for the community. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very interactive space. Annabelle is working on some domino tables that, come from her childhood. So community members are invited to come in and sit and have a sort of domino space with Puerto Rican ballads playing in the background. So it's a fully interactive space that we're working on.
What's the difference between knowing about these things because they're familiar to people in your family and seeing them transposed into this space?
That's an interesting question. So I think that what we would really like to do, what Hyde Square Task Force, the purpose of Boston's Latin Quarter is, and the purpose behind this festival is really about celebrating cultural heritage. And so, I think that there's maybe the answer to your question is that it's a combination of both. I mean, we want things to feel very familiar and exciting to people. And then we also, we're working with internationally renowned artists who are also creating art for us. So our youth, Hyde Square Task Force works with teens after school and during the summer to do arts programming. And so they're a part of shaping these projects, and they've been working with these artists. They'll be their day of performing at 5 o'clock. And so I think that, to us, we know that the Hyde Jackson neighborhood is changing really quickly. And so part of what's exciting about Boston's Latin Quarter and creating these spaces for residents to mingle and get to know each other is that we want it to be a priority that we're preserving the cultural heritage of this neighborhood and the deep immigrant and Latino roots.
So you grew up in an immigrant family because you're originally from Taiwan, but I have that feeling that that culture is something that is locked up in the family, in the home, and you sort of cut off from what's around you. Now, if you take that culture and you put it outside, does that help break down isolation?
I'm not sure. I think isolation is more of a retrospective idea, because in the moment, it certainly didn't feel that way. But, you know, for me, it's the idea of that once you're an immigrant, you're always an immigrant. You know, whether you go back home or not, you're an immigrant in that space as well. So I think this cultural piece, this cultural preservation piece, and expanding it into sort of different conversations through interaction is something that is a very intrinsic part of any immigrant's life, right? So I guess that's where that piece comes into the programming, because each one of the artists also has their own different perceptions of, they're also immigrants, they're transplants, they're, you know, born here residents. And so the perspectives of immigration and changing space culturally are all going to be sort of within the interaction between the audience and these installations.
Try to imagine what this is going to be like for young people that you work with at the task force, because you know, they're not going to grow up to be more like their parents necessarily. They're going to be something else. And
Yeah.
how does this work for them?
I think, you know, each one of them is finding their own path and figuring, you know, out their own, what their histories will write. And we have youth who come to us, you know, from all different kinds of backgrounds. The majority of the teens that we work with are Latino, Afro-Latin, Caribbean, but not all of them. And, you know, I think a lot of them find themselves in a place where they're first generation and they're exploring, you know, they're experiencing a different America than their parents, but many of them have been here for many years, and some of their families have even lived in our neighborhood for many generations. So the youth definitely are a great mix of experiences and histories.
So one of the artists here, he's not Latino. His background is more the North End, where the Italian Americans have almost totally faded. Why bring into this Hyde Square context?
So Pat is really interesting because the artists are composed of pretty, you know, successful artists in their own right, some of which were participants in the Foster Prize winning, and like Raul obviously is represented by Carol's and Sons and has worked in literature and everything else. And Pat, I think, to me, in this whole constellation represents the Bostonian, right? So Pat is the Sicilian, grew up around and has deep history in the North End, his family does. And he's someone that is very conscientious of his role because he works with and in a very diverse space. And so I think Pat and I have had lots of conversations about gentrification and sort of his awareness around it.
His irreverent awareness, I should say, right?
Right, like, and because it is, I mean, we should bring that up more in academic talking and sort of community talking, because the gentrification happens on both sides, you know what I mean? And sometimes there are people caught in the middle. So for instance, right now, Jackson, there's a whole strip where it's sort of like at this point, a traditionally SMFA houses that house art students. These students, the demographic of these artists look different, you know? And so there's people caught in that space as well who witness the changes in gentrification, but are in a different role because they're not, the original residents, and they're not necessarily incoming because they've been and are from the creative economy of Boston. So Pat's perspective was important to me. It was also important to me to keep a ratio, obviously. I mean, you see the scope of the artists, and Pat is the only one who isn't of Latin descent. But he represents a deep history of change that's from that specific perspective.
I mean, it's a tall order to fight market change, but by developing Hyde Square as a Latin quarter, making it a hub for activity like this, how does this help the community?
I think it helps the community in a lot of different ways. We'd like to see it connect residents and neighbors. We know that the neighborhood's changing really quickly, that a lot of the Latino families who lived there for many years are either in the process of moving out or have moved out, but also many of them haven't. And so what we see is these two kind of, newcomers and then the more traditional residents, and they're not really mixing very well and they don't really have a space to mix. And so we're hoping that by, celebrating Afro-Latin arts, by, bringing the music of the Caribbeans and the food to kind of everybody, that it will hopefully create a bridging ground. And we want arts to do that. We want food. We want music to do that. And so this is our first Latin Quarter Arts Festival. And next year it will just be even bigger. And after that it will be even bigger. We're really excited about exploring the world of Afro-Latin artists in Boston who we'd like to give as much support to and elevate as much as possible, and then see them change the neighborhood alongside our youth.
Is that what you see here, Zo, that where one kind of community talks to another through the art? This isn't just about our art and this is just for us.
Well, no, in terms of my role and my interests, which is different because I don't work for Hyde Square Task Force necessarily. I was interested in, and this goes back to your question about the youth involvement, I was interested in introducing fine artists who, have some backgrounds and focuses in storytelling and immigration and cultural preservation to this space. Obviously for the festival, but more importantly for the relationships that they could have with the youth, so that in this changing space coming up on the timeline, the youth have the tools to create and document and tell stories as they will. So they will develop their own sort of styles of storytelling through media. And that, I think, is the most important part to me, is to see the youth of this organization go from, this history that was different than a cultural preservation.
No, if you don't create your own history, someone else would do it for you.
Exactly.
Emma, if people want more information about this, you get the time and place and where they can find out more details?
Yes, so the festival is this weekend, the 19th of September, 19th and 20th, 12 to 9 p.m. Saturday is going to be a really fun day. At about 5 we have performances. At 6 p.m. it will be we'll have a reception from 6 to 9 p.m. with dancing and food and music, and it will feature DJ Lizito, who's from Hyde Square and is a longtime resident, and also DJ Nova Soul,
Who's a guest of Pico Picante.
And then Sunday from 12 to 4, the festival will continue. All the exhibits will be out.
Also, briefly, October 3rd, you got a couple of things coming up as well?
Sure, yeah. So this is, thank you for mentioning that. This is part of Hispanic Heritage Month and what Hyde Square Task Force is doing for Hispanic Heritage Month. So that begins September 15th, goes to October 15th. The next events will be October 3rd. The morning of October 3rd, we have a story walk, which is in partnership with the Connolly Library right down the street. Families begin at the library and go store to store reading a page of a book in each store window. And then the story is called Drum Dream Girl. It's about a Afro-Cuban drummer girl who is told by everyone that she can't drum. So she perseveres, and the day will end with a percussion workshop actually taught by female percussionist youth Hyde Square Task Force teens. And then that afternoon, we're going to be showing the documentary Only When I Dance in partnership with the Boston Ballet.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And by the way, online, people should check out?
So hydesquare.org, www.hydesquare.org, and we have all of these events up there. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Thank you very, very much. Emma Blaxter from Hyde Square Task Force and Zo.E. Ling. Up ahead, we'll have sports with Pat Flaherty.